Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast today. Today, we're going to talk about numbers, political strategy, and also voter sentiment. And who is the best guy to ask about data other than our guest today, which is Ibrahim Suffian of Merdeka Centre.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. First thing is, congratulations with Merdeka Centre. You got the Johor prediction right. Okay, for me, on hindsight, how did the demographic, how did they vote, and especially the Gen Z and also the young voters?
Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It's an honor. I think when you look at Johor, I think first and foremost, Johor is a BN, Barisan National Stronghold State. So for the longest time, they have a very strong base of supporters there. And what we notice is that in the last two elections, in the general election in 2018, 2022 general election, we noticed that the BN support amongst its supporters seemed to dwindle a bit. And partly because at that time, the politicians, leaders of the state, some split away and formed a new party, Bersatu, at that time. So that took away some support from Barisan Nasional. But I think what has happened in this recent state election, I think it marks a recovery for Barisan Nasional on three counts. Number one, the voters of Barisan Nasional, particularly supporters who were dissatisfied, maybe disillusioned with the party, have slowly started to come back. Number two, there's less political turmoil in the state because even though Barisan Nasional is state government and Pakatan Harapan is opposition, but because Barisan Nasional is part of the national coalition, there has not been a lot of very sharp criticism. There has not been a lot of contests in the state, and therefore they've been able to carry out the work. There's not a lot of political drama in the state, and so Barisan Nasional has done. And I think thirdly, the economy has performed very well in the state. Although there are issues, there are some gaps here and there, but by and large, people are very satisfied. And when we look in terms of overall support, support for Barisan Nasional improved pretty much across its base, which is the Malay Muslim base. That one improved from 45% to 60%. But when we look at, say, Gen Z voters, for Gen Z voters, we see that the rise isn't as much. We notice that Gen Z voters, particularly in the Malay segment, they remain a bit anti-establishment. And when they say anti-establishment, it's not specifically going for Perikatan Nasional, but some also went to support Pakatan Harapan. So support amongst the younger Malays, Gen Z, is a bit more split. I think one pattern that I have to mention here is that in Johor, there is a big difference between the west coast of Johor and east coast of Johor. In east coast of Johor, Barisan Nasional is very, very strong across the board. In the west coast, it is more contested. And I think this is where, when we run some analysis, some research ahead of the state election, we focus more on the west coast because it's more multicultural. There's a lot more things going on there economically, but also a lot of challenges, and also where most of the people live. And we find that there, support among Gen Z for Barisan Nasional, more split. It's about 1/3 for each party.
Okay. Some people say that Barisan won is because of the Menteri Besar. What do you think? Is it solely him or he played a big factor?
Well, it's multiple factors. I would say the Menteri Besar on Hafiz does play a strong role in ensuring that the support remains solid because, number one, he has been pretty much an efficient administrator. He has carried out his duties without a lot of controversies, and he seemed to be presiding over the strong economic growth of the state. And therefore, I think people see him as someone who is caring about the future of the state economy, is trying to solve problems hands-on. Sometimes, we see him at the customs checkpoint, we see him turun padang, as people say. And because of that, people feel that, he's a good leader. That's one important factor because I think there, Barisan Nasional has a clear leader whom people have already trusted and have a track record of administering. But beyond that, there is a wider improvement in terms of support. And I think this in part is due to the party leadership's effort to consolidate the party. So we noticed that after 2022, 2018, there's a splintering in the party. Some leaders left, some suspended, some, expelled from the party. But under President of UMNO, Datuk Zahid, he has the Rumah Bangsa concept where he's bringing back all those people that have left the party or were sidelined in the party. So now they're coming back. And I think this has allowed the party to consolidate and present a more unified front in the state election, and I assume also in preparation for the future general election.
Okay. All eyes now is in Negeri Sembilan. So how do you see the demographic in terms of voting compared to any difference with Johor, or it's uniquely Negeri Sembilan?
I think there are some differences there. I think number one, in where things are similar between Johor and Negeri Sembilan is that both in Negeri Sembilan as well as Johor, Barisan Nasional in the Malay ground is quite strong.
Oh, okay.
And I think these two states also see very limited penetration by PAS, in the previous iterations. I mean, if you go back far, say 2018, PAS support amongst Malay voters in the state perhaps less than 12%. But over the years, because PAS has partnered with Bersatu, their support has increased. By the 2023 state elections, we noticed that PAS support among Malay voters in the state of Negeri Sembilan has actually gone beyond 50%. It's gone to 55%. So this is different than in Johor, where in Johor, PAS support has not gone as far as to that extent. So I think that's one aspect where there's some similarities, where Barisan remains strong. And so in this election is again a test of the success of the Rumah Bangsa concept, whether or not Barisan Nasional has consolidated all the supporters back to come back home. That's one aspect. And number two is whether or not PAS, which has now encountered some problems with Bersatu and now try to reconsolidate Perikatan Nasional with Hamzah Zainuddin Party. So we see how that is able to hold the ground in the state. Secondarily, in terms of voter demographics, it's also mixed, like in Johor and also in Negeri Sembilan, it's also multicultural. But the multi-ethnic seats, the mixed seats, are mostly around Seremban town and a little bit around PD, so a bit limited. So when we look at, say, more mixed seat, it only accounts for about 30-40% of the seats in the state assembly. And I think this also means that this election is actually an advantage for Barisan Nasional. Furthermore, now they have an electoral pact with Perikatan Nasional, right, with PAS. And so their chances have become a lot better.
You went ahead of my question. I'll ask you later about
okay.
prediction. Before I ask that big question, but looks like I roughly know what's your prediction lah. Okay, you talk about Johor, you talk about Negeri Sembilan. How about national? How do you see the demographic?
Yeah, I think if you look at, say, our politics right now,
Yeah.
our politics have always been determined by ethnic voting. Because our voters are all represented by political parties that represent the ethnic group. So typically, there's always two political parties that represent ethnic group, whether they're in government or they're in opposition. So I think will still be the case for the most part. However, I think we are now reaching a very interesting and potentially historic moment in our country's political history, because never before has UMNO and PAS really worked together, in the last maybe 60 years.
Okay.
I think the last time they worked together was between 1970 and 1974. After that, they fell apart. And since then, they have been basically contesting against one another. If, let's say, PAS and UMNO is able to bridge the gap and coordinate their contestation in the future elections, then I think we see this a new page in our country political history where the identity voting is going to become more prominent, and that has, I think, a lot of implications in terms of public life in our country. So nationally, we see that the pattern that we saw in Johor and now that we are going to see in Negeri Sembilan will play itself out in national elections because of the cooperation between UMNO and PAS.
Okay, then we're going to Malacca. Do you think PAS and UMNO will still be in this? Some people call it marriage of convenience, and then will it go into G16, or there's a possibility like some marriages or marriage of convenience that they will break up? And yeah, how do you see that?
Well, I think the next election we're going to see is Malacca state election. And I think in Malacca, Barisan Nasional is quite dominant. So I think there it's a bit harder to imagine, PAS demanding a lot of seats and wanting to contest by themselves. But that remains to be seen because, in politics, a lot of things are possible, even if we think it's very hard to achieve. So I think we might see some semblance of coordination between UMNO and PAS in the state election of Malacca. And potentially in the national election as well. I would say in Malacca, UMNO is dominant. So basically in the southern part of Peninsular Malaysia, Melaka, Negeri Sembilan and also Johor, Barisan Nasional UMNO is quite dominant there. And therefore PAS is playing a secondary role. And I think we'll have to depend on Barisan Nasional's generosity in order to give them seats to contest. But I think national elections is a different story completely.
Yes.
Because, if you think of national elections and just look at Peninsular Malaysia, out of 165 parliamentary seats in Peninsular Malaysia, 120 are Malay majority seats. Out of these 120 Malay majority seats, 71 seats already under the control of PAS or its coalition partner. And therefore, PAS already have the lion's share of the Malay majority seats. UMNO has only 25. And so for them to be the bigger party, they will need PAS to concede some of the seats. So it's something, negotiation that hasn't happened yet. It may happen, but I find it very difficult to imagine that PAS would give up seats that they have already won. So I think this is something where I would give a 50% chance of it working out, 50% chance of it not working out at national level. But at state level, it's actually quite possible, especially in state where Barisan Nasional is dominant. I think the flip side to that is to imagine why would PAS give seats to UMNO in, say, Terengganu, where they won all the state constituency, right? So maybe they give a handful, and will UMNO be content with a limited contestation, whereas in state of Terengganu, Kelantan, Kedah, the Pakatan Harapan is not really a player in the political arena there.
Based on your numbers, the one that which PN won and UMNO won, it looks like UMNO will get such a small chunk, isn't it? So big question is whether they're willing to accept that small chunk.
Yeah, it looks like, even if, let's say, UMNO improve its political performance in the future general election, the number of seats it can attain is quite limited. Maybe 40, maybe 50 seats if they're very lucky, if they have an electoral pact with PAS. So the question is, if PAS continue to have more seats than UMNO, will they allow UMNO the Prime Minister post? And even if they allow UMNO the Prime Minister post, they will still demand other positions in government, senior posts in the cabinet, and also it will mark their entry into government in a much more pervasive, much more powerful way that could, I think, in the long run, disadvantage UMNO in the future.
Okay. I change a bit of the topic. What's your free advice to this? I call them fringe party at the moment. To just say Bersama, Bersatu, I consider fringe, and also Muda. What's your free advice to them?
Well, I think for the smaller parties that we are still seeing in the political arena, I think first and foremost, parties like Muda and Bersama, they have, I would say, an uphill task in trying to win over votes. In part because they are grounded or they're founded on the notion of reform or fighting for certain specific segments of society. That segment is very small. And mostly centered around urban areas. In urban areas, we have Pakatan Harapan already quite established, but with the emergence of PAS and Barisan Nasional working together, it also means that the votes that used to be split in the previous elections may be now consolidated. And so what we have seen in the Johor election is that while they are not able to win seats, parties like Muda and Bersama can potentially help Barisan Nasional win seats. If you imagine a place like, say, Pandan, where it is on paper, Barisan Nasional lost the seat, PAS also lost the seat, and Pakatan Harapan won the seat by a handsome margin in the 2022 general election. But if we imagine a situation where BN and PAS work together, and then you have a party like Bersama contest there, and the voters who are going to vote for Bersama are the people who more likely than not vote Pakatan Harapan. So that's going to split the Pakatan Harapan. So the challenge now is, what will Pakatan Harapan do? You know, in the confronting parties like Bersama, and I think so. I think Bersama will have a challenge to win seats, but it can have an impact on the election. But I think they have to ask themselves, what kind of impact do you want? Do you want to assist a reform agenda, or do you want parties that are the more traditional parties like BN or PAS win the election? So what's the outcome that they seek to achieve? Whereas for parties like Bersatu, they have, I think, a unique proposition, because parties like Bersatu is tailored for the Malay market, right of centre, more conservative or nationalist Malay party, and even though they have now fallen out with PAS and splintered with this party Wawasan Negara, comprising some of the MPs have broken off and formed their own thing. They still represent, I would say, a unique proposition. So if they have an electoral pact with Pakatan Harapan, they could potentially be able to come back. Because I think one of the things that we've noticed in Malaysian political history over the years, most splinter parties never last 2 election cycles, and with the exception of PKR, when it splintered away from UMNO, right? And if they form themselves as an ethnic party, it's even harder to survive. The reason is because the support is very, very limited, and over time, the issues that propel the party to be formed, the issues begin to dissipate. People are not as angry anymore. And then over time, people will go back to the old party, and new voters that come on stream, they are no longer aware of the issues that created this party in the beginning. So they have to think of themselves, their political career, their political future, because I think as a brand, party like Bersatu can still play an important role, but they have to use this moment very, very strategically in order to ensure that they have continuity.
So see whether I got you right. It looks like what you're saying is there's a possibility that Dato Azmin Ali will be back with Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim in terms of a pact.
I mean, we cannot deny that, all right? I would say that I think in moments where they all need each other, I think people will find, an opportunity to find work together, because it fits the interests of both sides. They both need each other potentially to face the challenges of GE16.
So it will be something like GE 14, isn't it? When Bersatu and PKR and DAP and Amanah.
Yeah, a PH 1.0, right?
Yeah.
The PH 1.0 moment in 2018, where they were all together, and that at the time when PH was able to capture a majority of the seats by themselves. And so I think the problem that we have in our political situation right now is that none of the parties can win majority by themselves. None of the coalitions can win by themselves. So they have to partner with one another. The thing that have changed before compared to before is whether or not once they have won, they can stick to it,
Okay,
and then not go and jump ship and join another gang.
Okay, prediction time. You were already giving us hint on who will win. There are 36 seats in Negeri Sembilan. Which coalition will win?
I think based on the work that we are doing in Negeri Sembilan right now, I think the advantage lies with Barisan Nasional.
And
Perikatan Nasional. Because when we look at 36 seats, right? So Barisan is contesting 24, and Perikatan is contesting 12. Or was it 11? I can't remember. Anyway, 12.
Okay.
And so they already split the seats among themselves. And what we are seeing in Johor probably will play itself out. Like most of the Malay voters in those constituencies, they're just going to vote for the majority party, the bigger party, either BN or PN. Of course, we can go into the details, and some places we notice that the Barisan Nasional people are unhappy because they don't want to vote for the PAS guy, but it's a PAS candidate there. So there's the issue of vote transferability. But given the demographics of this area, I would say that in constituencies where there are more than 65% Malay voters in that constituency. Barisan Nasional and Perikatan Nasional have advantage in the seat. So we are seeing that very likely Barisan and PN will be able to win the election. The question is, we didn't do the count in terms of BN and PN, which parties are winning those seats. It's a uphill challenge for PH to actually hang on to power, because even in the last state election, they only won 14. So they were still short of the 19 needed for majority. We think that they can still potentially keep 14 seats. Maybe they'll dwindle down to 13 or even 12. But it's hard for them to, I think, get to 19 seats in the current situation when their opponents have decided to work together.
Okay. How stable is this unity government in national level? Are they stable? Because the other partner, which is the main partner, that is UMNO, is with PAS, the opposition. So how do you see the stability of this unity government?
I think the stability is definitely going to be doubted by many people, and also I think in terms of real effectiveness. I think number one, I think let me start by saying that I think the stability is still up for grabs. It's still not lost. It also depends on the behavior of the leaders of the different coalitions. If they begin to attack one another openly in the national stage, then I think the stability is going to be short-lived. Or if they entertain ideas in order to topple the government by forming a new coalition with other parties, that definitely will be, I think, a question that's on a lot of people's minds. So I think the stability index probably drop. If let's say it was maybe 90 before Johor, now it gone to 80, and maybe after Negeri Sembilan, it probably go down to 65, 70. If I want to give an indication of what the levels of confidence are. So it's still there, but a lot depends now on the personality powers of the main coalition leaders, whether they want to continue to work together or whether they are feeling that since general election is very near, I might as well start to compete now. That I think is going to be increasingly washed out for going to be the case.
Okay, you said personality involved. Who are the main key personalities that will keep this unity government stable or destabilize it? Who are
the leaders of the parties, so the Prime Minister, President of UMNO and his Deputy President, the President of GPS, GRS and the other parties that currently make up the unity government. So they are key. So if let's say, if the parties from Sabah and Sarawak entertain the idea that we can form a government with Barisan Nasional and Perikatan Nasional, then the government will collapse. So a lot depends on basically now personal leadership. So I think we are now entering the era where leadership really matters, whether or not this coming year is going to be stable or going to be fraught with political volatility.
Okay. My last question. So when do you think is bubar?
For general election?
Yeah, G16.
I think you have to ask the only God and Prime Minister Anwar knows. But if you want to speculate, right? If you want to speculate and look at timing, I think number one, Prime Minister Anwar, I think he, has got a good thing going. I think a lot of people who focus on the daily politics, I think, fail to see maybe some of the stuff that he's trying to do. I think the challenges that we see facing the country, and this comes from the surveys that we carried out, everyone complains about cost of living. Everybody's complained about stagnant wages and all that. I think when we come to this point, I think the Prime Minister and his team got the strategy right, which is to expand the economy. And I would say that compared to all our neighbours in the region, Malaysia is about the only country that has been able to continue to attract a lot of foreign investments into the country at a time when there's all this uncertainty, because you got US-China trade war, you got conflict Middle East and in Europe, but he's been doing a lot of marketing work and bringing people in. And in the beginning, when he first took on office, I noticed that people in opposition were saying that, he doesn't have an economic plan. And then, and then he carry on and do these things. But we can see now, the broader strategy is to actually expand the economy so that we don't have to tax people so much. and then there's greater demand for talent and skilled workers and all that. So salaries should rise. But all of these strategies take time to take root, to be implemented, to translate into jobs. And I think the government is not doing a great job about selling their story, about their strategy. Unlike, say, the time of Dr. Mahathir, where everybody saw Dr. Mahathir as a visionary. But Dr. Mahathir didn't live in the era of TikTok and Threads and Twitter, and WhatsApp. So he's got, I think, the bigger picture right. But I think the challenge is ensuring that some of this economic growth trickles down to the people, and it's taking time. And therefore, we continue to see dissatisfaction. And it is dissatisfaction and distrust that we have amongst our voters that's giving room for his competition, the opponents, alternative parties, to actually say that he's not doing such a good job. And I think it is his interest to actually try and delay the election for as long as possible, take it to the full term. It would be in his interest to do that, because then it gives him ability to actually deliver or manifest some of the benefits to the rakyat before the election, so that they understand what it means. Because we've got budget speech in 2027 for 27 coming up, and then if he can take it to the full term, he's got 2 budget speeches that he can give, right? And so that, I think, is room for him to explain, but also display what he has done for the country.
Okay. It looks like, according to Ibrahim Suffian of Merdeka Centre, PM will stretch it until the end. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for your insight. I'm Philip Golingai. Thanks.